So hello there, this is Wingless Oracle and it's 2019 and I'm back with my first bike review of 2019. I was actually planning on doing some reviews last year. Suzuki GSX-R 250 was planned, Moto Guzzi, some others, but every time something came up, it was either work or the weather wasn't permitting or the bike got sold. So yeah, this is actually my first new clip after I did the long-term review on my Versys that I'm driving now, which by the way I still love. So I'm on my way to my Triumph and Kawasaki and Suzuki dealer here in Brabant, in the south of the Netherlands. This is Motorcentrum Rijen, and if all went well, they have a Scrambler 1200 XE from Triumph waiting for me to take out for a test ride, and I'm really excited about that because it's a bike I've been looking forward to a long time. Looking forward to buying a Scrambler style bike that actually can scramble and with a nice low down grunt, and that looks cool. And basically Triumph, they just brought out this Scrambler slash naked adventure bike with a retro style. It suits my riding requirements, it suits my personal taste for looks. So yeah, very excited about this bike. I'm a little biased, as you can hear, because I've been looking forward to it. So I'll try to be as honest as I can when I ride the bike. But bear in mind, it's a bike I really fancy, so I might be a little bit biased in my first impression review later on. So yeah, join me in a few seconds, and I'll give you my very first impression of the Triumph Scrambler 1200 XE. See you in a bit.
So this is me driving the XE, testing it. Just picked it up from the dealer, and you're hearing a voiceover. That's correct, because about 2 kilometers down the road, I think I turned on my external audio recording device, but actually turned it off. So the only audio I recorded was from the GoPro on my helmet, which gave a lot of noise. So you're gonna have to do it with a voiceover. Terribly sorry for that. It's my rookie mistake, number one, and hopefully I won't make that one again. Oh look, that's me making the rookie mistake just before I leave and start talking a lot in my helmet. Good for nothing. Well, first of all, it's a, as you can see, very all-roady bike. Goes over the grass and over the pavement. Now I think I'd start off with the riding position on the bike. So I was very curious about this bike, and I'm also very curious about the other bike in the line. So this is the XE, the more expensive. E stands for expensive or extreme. And there's also the XC, C stands for cross country, but maybe it's easier to just remind cheap. So expensive and cheap. This is the expensive one. I'm very interested in seeing, feeling the riding difference between the two, but I'll get back to that later. So riding position. The feel. What does this bike make me feel like I'm riding? It makes me feel like I'm riding a mid-size or even a big adventure bike. It's not a small bike. It feels a bit lighter than the big adventure bikes like a GS 1200 or the KTM 1190R I had. So it's a little bit more compact and a little bit lighter than that, a little bit more nimble. Somewhere in between there. The leg angle is very comfortable. It's over 90 degrees, so you're not tucked up, very compact. You can sit in this for ages, I think, without any stress. The seat is firm. It's not a hard seat by any means. It's firm, but I think that's comfortable, especially on longer rides. And it's a big seat, so you can move around anywhere you want, adjust yourself. So yeah, very comfortable riding position. I do have to mention it's high up riding position, just like the big adventure bikes like the 1190. It's high on its wheels. So if I would have to say, is it more an adventure bike leaning towards a Scrambler feel, or is it more an off-road bike? For me, taste is personal. This bike, specific the XE version, is leaning more towards an off-road bike. I know people have different opinions on what a Scrambler is and is not, but for me, this veers more toward an off-road bike. Don't get me wrong; it's by no means an off-road motorcycle. It's too big and too heavy for that, but the riding position gets close to that, especially with the big bars. The XE has wider bars than the XC, and these bars are I wouldn't say extremely wide, but they're very wide, and that gives that extra off-road feel. I didn't take the bike through heavy traffic, so I don't know how these wide handlebars hold in traffic when you're filtering. That would be interesting if somebody has experience with that already, if it's makes sense to use this bike as a commute bike filtering through a lot of traffic, or if it's maybe just a little bit too wide in the bars for that. Talking about wide, I've heard some people and seen some blogs on people that say that the exhaust is in your way, pushes your knee out, so your right knee would be pushed out, standing or sitting. Not the case on this bike. I haven't ridden the 900 Street Scrambler, which apparently is more the case, or other Scramblers. I can tell you on this bike, at least sitting down, it's no bother at all. You don't notice it. The exhaust is tucked in nicely, and when it comes to standing, you notice it minutely. So as you can see, I took the bike through some small villages to see how it holds up in small country roads and tight spots. See if you can use it as a kind of a relaxed tourer through the countryside, and it's perfect for that. It has that comfortable riding position. It soaks up everything in the road with its extensive suspension, and it handles really well in these kind of situations, and it gives you the idea that you can just go over everything that's thrown at you. So no issues there. So we've talked about how the bike feels to ride. Let's talk about how it looks. Well, I'm guessing that if you're looking at this video that you've already checked out a lot of videos and clips and pictures of the bike. It's of course always subjective if you like it or not. I like it. I think it's one of the more beautiful bikes that Triumph has produced this year. I own a Thruxton R. I think this looks even better than the Thruxton R. So yeah, I really like the retro style look. It's basically, like people describe it, a naked adventure bike with cool styling. I like the high exhaust, etc., etc. Now, I'm not going to go into much details because you can figure it out yourself looking at the pictures on the side of Triumph. What I like about this Triumph, and as well as about the other Triumphs and my own Thruxton as well, is the attention to detail and the level of sophistication that Triumph puts into manufacturing these bikes. It's really good quality. Every nook and cranny you look at, it's really well finished. I've had my Thruxton for let's say 4 years now, no, 3 years, and it still looks as pristine as it did when I exited the showroom. And it's really good quality, so much attention to detail. I really like that Triumph is doing that. I think they nailed it again with this bike. Yeah, but as I said, it's personal. Maybe you just don't like the looks. I love it. The sound, it's interesting. I mentioned I own a Thruxton R, which basically has the same engine. For some kind of reason, this engine sounds completely different than my Thruxton R. Of course, they've fiddled around with it. They've made the engine a bit lighter and spinning up a bit easier. They've changed the mapping so to make it more low-down torque and adventurous and less high revving than the Thruxton. So that would explain the difference in sound, but it just gives a completely different character to the sound that you hear, which I find astonishing, and it's got a really cool low down grunt. It's really got that low 2-cylinder British sound to it, which I really like. It's kind of a gutsy sound. So I talked about what the bike feels like to ride, talked about what it looks like, at least to me, in my personal experience, and I think combine those two, you get to the emotional part. So what does it make you feel like when you ride the bike? And for me personally, this bike ticks a lot of boxes. It ticks the adventurous box, so it gives me that idea that I can go anywhere, cross any road, take this bike to Southern Europe, go through the Pyrenees, whatever, off-roading. But it can do that, and it also gives you the feeling and the confidence to do it. It also gives you that kind of street scrambler hooligan-esque feeling. It's a bit bigger and it's a bit taller, so it's maybe a little bit less of that feeling, but it does give you that hooligan bike feeling. You can toss it around, do quick overtakes. It's relatively flickable for the bike of its size and with a 21-inch front wheel. So I was really surprised with that, and that gives you that kind of a fun feeling that you have on say a naked bike. So it gives you a bit hooligan, it gives you a bit adventure, and for me, I really dig the retro style. I think it looks perfect, and the cool bike makes me look cool as well. So adding those three together really ticks all the boxes, and that emotion that the bike gives you, that you want to ride it, that riding the bike is fun, and that you feel good riding the bike. That's why we buy bikes, isn't it? So, let's talk about some other stuff I noticed while riding the bike. First of all, as a lot of people say, it's a big bike, but it's also a very easy bike. It's not a very intimidating experience. If you don't take the height into account, and I'm 1 meter and 80 centimeters, and I can flat feet, both feet sitting down. So if you're about that size, you shouldn't have any issues with the height. If that's not an issue for you, the rest of the bike is not intimidating. It's a very gentle, easy, low revving bike. Gives you a good sense that you're in control. So no crazy stuff there. It's a good high riding position, which I tend to like because I like the overview of the road. Again, that's personal. Obviously, there is absolutely no protection from the elements other than the handguards, which are standard on the XE. And I have to commend Triumph. They did a decent job on these handguards because they've got metal backbones in them, and that's something that I haven't seen any other brands like KTM or BMW or Kawasaki do yet. So yeah, kudos for that. Triumph, decent, strong metal handguards on there, and do a good job. No other protection. So if you're expecting to do long hauls on this, you have to be prepared to sit in the wind, and I rode the bike on the freeway for a short amount of time, and you do feel the pressure on your shoulders. I'm kind of used to that because I ride naked bikes, but that can be kind of a challenge if you're not used to it, or it can be a surprise or negative experience if you're not used to it, especially on highway speeds. Of course, that can be solved with a small fly screen. Triumph has two sizes optional, I think, in the accessory sets, and they take away, to my experience, these small fly screens, they take away a lot of pressure from your chest and just give you a more relaxed ride. So that's the fly screen. Another reason to put on a fly screen, one of the things I really don't, oh look at me, that's me, I'm fiddling around with the light. Okay, I had a comment of that on my Triumph as well. So Triumph have this kind of weird way of having your light switched on. You can see red, green, blue, green, and it's, well, as you can see, it takes some getting used to. It's a flash on, flash off, headlight, not headlight, dim light, city light, I don't know what's on, I can't see. It's very counterintuitive. Of course, if you own a bike like this, you'll figure it out in, well, how long did it take me to figure it out? Just over 30 seconds. You'll figure it out in 30 seconds, you won't forget. But just the fact that it's not intuitive, that's really a shame. And that's the same on the Thruxton. They also have this non-intuitive headlight setting. Okay, so I got distracted by myself fiddling around with light. Another reason to fit a fly screen, that would be because there's a gap between the TFT screen and the headlight, and obviously there's a gap, there has to be something, but it's kind of an ugly gap, and I think when it comes to styling, that's something they could have done better, because you see the cables coming out of the TFT screen going back into the headlight. So yeah, that would be something I would cover up with kind of a small plate, or a fly screen could do the same job. Okay, so talking about the TFT screen, it's not very retro like on my Thruxton with the double clocks. So I was kind of in the middle if I like it, but I decided I do. I think they've done a really cool job in making this TFT screen round, and with the side screens integrated in kind of a bezel. It gives it a kind of a more classy look as a TFT screen, like you have some of these classy screens on digital watches as well, and I think they did a good job. It's much better than the standard square screens with rev meter and a big white screen with a counter on it and stuff like that. So I think they did a classy job on the TFT screen. I haven't fiddled around with it, so I can't tell you too much about it. What I understand from other people and other reviews is that it does a good job. It's very bright. It's state-of-the-art second generation for Triumph, and it's easy to handle. I do find the joystick on the left handlebar a bit fiddly. I'll probably take some getting used to. But as I mentioned, I haven't played around with it in the short drive I did with it. So then, switches. I was talking about the fiddly joystick. And the gear switches on Triumph, I think they're always, at least in the last models, they've always been very sturdy and firm and well placed. And also backlit. The only other brand I know of, and I might be mistaken, is KTM that does that standard. Maybe BMW. I really don't know. If you know other brands that do that, please share a comment. But I love backlit. Indicator switches because it really helps out in the dark, and I drive quite a lot in the dark. Okay, talking about the dark, light. I had a little rant on the lights on my Versys. Lights on this bike, I haven't ridden it in the dark, but I have looked at them from several distances. I think these are probably best in market if you look at the specs, what's now around. So it's really good lighting, LED lighting all around. Really good job, nothing to complain about. Mirrors, well, it's kind of a stalky mirrors. You see that on these kind of bikes. I have to find mirrors that look good on a bike and are functional. So mirrors have to be functional or they have to look good. These are very functional, they do a good job. They don't look good. Yeah, that's my opinion about mirrors. But you need them. Okay, so I already talked about the handguards, they're really good and very firm. And a nice aspect people might be interested in. There's always been a lot of complaints about from real off-roaders on the Tiger 800 that the foot pegs don't come off and that you can injure yourself falling with the bike, and then the foot pegs get stuck in your calf bone. And these come off. You wouldn't say it if you look at them from the side on the pictures, but they're neat bolts that you can reach. And you can take them off very easily, 2 bolts for your foot peg. So yeah, the passenger pegs come off really easy. So that's good news for those hardcore off-road riders. Okay, talking about the 800 Tiger, I do think this is a kind of a competitor for it. So that's kind of a interesting move from Triumph, because I think this bike, as I mentioned, and a lot of people call it's a naked adventure bike. It's somewhere between a mid-size and a heavy naked adventure bike. Not looking at the displacement, because that makes it a heavy bike, but it's just a bit lighter and a bit more nimble than the big bikes. So yeah, it comes close to a naked Triumph Tiger 800. So it kind of competes with that, and it has a shitload of nice electronic toys on board, and a lot of new gadgets like the Bluetooth connectivity and the GoPro connectivity and the sat nav indication, which isn't on the 800 Tiger. Also good to know with these bikes, it's Triumph, so they've got like a phone book full of accessories you can order, so you can really customize the bike any way you like, which I think with these kind of bikes is really nice, that you can just, even without too much knowledge on mechanics and with 2 left hands, you can still do a lot of mods on these kind of bikes and really make them personal if you're willing to spend the cash for that. So in the beginning of the clip I mentioned I was kind of enthusiastic about this bike because I was thinking about buying one. Basically that means selling my Thruxton now and buying this, which I still think is a good idea, because I think I'll have more fun on this bike and ride it more than my Thruxton, and ride it to more places than my Thruxton. So from that point of view, it sounds like a good idea. And I think it still is, but I'm holding out because I also want to ride the XC. People say, okay, why would you want to do that? It's the lesser spec version. Why don't you just go for the full spec version? Okay, so you can look up the differences between the 2 models. It's of course the lean angle sensitive traction control and ABS, which is a big thing for a lot of people, and it's the suspension setup. But I think a lot of people are overlooking it. It's not just a 50mm less suspension on the XC front and rear, which is still, by the way, 200mm of suspension travel, which is nothing to be ashamed of on an adventure bike. But it's also a different geometry setup. So with the changes they make to the rake and trail, the bike becomes a little bit shorter, and making it more compact and making it more biased towards road riding and cornering. So I'm thinking this is not just a lower bike with less specs. I'm thinking this is a different riding experience as a whole. Now I haven't found any other clips on YouTubers that have really highlighted the riding difference that much, maybe one or two. Most just say it's a lower bike with less gadgets. I think it's more than that. I think it's a different riding experience, and I want to experience that riding experience before I choose which bike I will buy. When it comes to colors, I think I prefer the white and green over the blue, but I'm very interested in hearing you guys' opinion on that. And when it comes to the XC model, I tend to go for the black. Everybody's looking at the green one, but I think making a black one and then blacking it all out will be very cool with that bike, giving it a really edgy look. So let me know what you feel about colors and what you think about the riding position on the XC if you have had a chance to ride one. I'd be very interested in hearing that. So that concludes my first ride impression of the Triumph Scrambler 1200 XE. Really looking forward to riding the XC as well. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching, very kind of you, and stay safe, drive safe, bye bye.